She stood frozen in the middle of the glossy boardroom floor, the bucket and mop still beside her, as if her shift was supposed to end quietly, but instead, her tired eyes were fixed on the stack of papers she had accidentally knocked over when she was cleaning the CEO's table. She bent to gather them, but one sheet made her stop. Her hand trembled as she looked at the bold red numbers, rows of losses hidden inside fine print, numbers that no ordinary person would even notice. But she had a sharpness born not from education but from survival, raising 2 kids alone, balancing bills, counting every coin. She instantly understood something was very wrong and very big. The silence of the office pressed in on her, the city lights glowing like cold stars through the tall glass windows. She clutched the paper close, her heart hammering, because this was not just a mistake, this was a hole, an $800 million hole, and she realized whoever had buried it had meant for no one to ever find it. Her breath caught as the boardroom door creaked open, and the CEO himself walked in, his tailored suit sharp, his face proud but weary from endless meetings. He stopped when he saw her standing there with the papers in her hands. For a moment neither spoke, the janitor in her simple uniform and the most powerful man in the company staring at each other across a space too wide to cross with words. Alone, his eyes narrowed, then flicked to the sheets she held, and something in his expression shifted from annoyance to sharp alertness. She quickly tried to hide the papers behind her, but it was too late. His voice, deep, steady but carrying an edge, asked, "What are you doing with those?" She swallowed hard, her throat dry, but she couldn't lie. Her voice cracked as she said, "I think I just found a mistake." He stepped closer, his shoes echoing against the marble floor, every step making her pulse race. The air, thick with unspoken tension. She held her ground, though her knees shook. She had faced hunger, eviction, and the shame of children crying for food. She could face this man too. The CEO reached out slowly for the documents, but she pulled them back, shaking her head. "No, I need you to look at this. I think someone is stealing from you." Her words landed like a slap. His jaw tightened, his polished mask faltered for a second, then he snatched the file, opened it, and scanned the numbers, his lips moving silently, as if doing the math again, and again the silence grew heavier, only broken by the ticking clock on the wall. Finally he dropped the papers back onto the table, his face pale, his eyes unreadable. He looked at her, not as a janitor, not as someone beneath him, but as if she were suddenly a threat, or maybe the only person he could trust. He asked quietly, "How did you even see this?" Her voice, small but steady. "I clean offices every night. I know when things are out of place, and I know numbers when they don't add up. I may not be one of you, but I am not blind." He studied her, as if weighing what she had just done saved him, or doomed them both, because if she was right, then someone close, someone powerful had buried this, and if word got out, it could destroy everything: the company, the board, his legacy. She felt her breath shudder in her chest, wondering if he would call security, if he would crush her for daring to step beyond her role. Instead, he surprised her. He leaned back against the table, folding his arms, his face dark with thought. Then he whispered, "Do you know what you've just done?" She shook her head, barely, her hands gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. "And he said, you've uncovered a secret that could bring down half this city." His words chilled her. The skyscrapers outside looked suddenly like silent watchers, secrets in every lit window. She felt the weight of the paper heavy in her hands, heavier than anything she had ever held, not because of ink and numbers, but because it meant power, betrayal, and danger. She wanted to run, but something inside told her running would be useless. She was already part of this now. The CEO's eyes hardened, then softened, flickering between fear and gratitude. He straightened, adjusted his suit, and said, "If you're telling the truth, then you've just saved me, but if you're wrong, you've just signed your own ruin." She didn't flinch, she only whispered, "Then look again." "I'm not wrong." And with those words, the night shifted. The janitor, Mum, was no longer invisible, no longer just another shadow mopping floors. She had stepped into a storm where $800 million had gone missing, and every person who knew about it would kill to keep it hidden. The CEO's phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with a name she didn't know. His eyes darted to it, then to her, and he silenced the call, his decision unspoken but heavy. He looked at her one last time and said, "Lock that door. No one can know you're here yet." Her pulse thundered. She turned and slid the lock into place, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the room. And when she faced him again, she saw not just a powerful man, but someone suddenly exposed, desperate and dangerous. She wondered if saving him would save herself, or if she had just stepped into a trap with no way out. The mop bucket stood forgotten, the water still rippling, as if it knew everything was about to change forever. The air inside the boardroom felt heavier than any place she had ever been. The janitor mom pressed her back against the door after locking it, her hands still trembling. The CEO stood at the head of the table, staring at the papers again, his perfect mask slipping as he paced back and forth, his polished shoes tapping the marble floor like the ticking of a clock, each step reminding her that time was running and danger was crawling closer. She had thought the worst that could happen in her life was not having money for her kids' dinner, but now she realized the world she had stepped into was darker than she had ever imagined. He turned suddenly, his eyes sharp as a blade, and asked her, "How long have you been working here?" She swallowed hard, nearly whispering, 5 years, cleaning the same halls, the same rooms, the same secrets that nobody else noticed. He narrowed his gaze, as if measuring her loyalty and her silence, and then he asked, "Why would you even bother telling me? Why not keep walking and pretend you saw nothing?" Her answer came from a place deeper than fear. "Because I know what it feels like when someone takes everything from you, and no one listens when you scream that it is wrong." His expression shifted again, flickering with something human, almost vulnerable, then gone, replaced by the cold calculation of a man who understood that power was made of secrets, and the one she had found could shatter all of them. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Someone in this building planted that, someone close, someone who will not forgive us for pulling it out of the shadows, and if they find out that you were the one who uncovered it, they will destroy you, and they will not hesitate." Words made her knees weak, but she stood firm. The years of carrying her children through hunger and nights of exhaustion gave her a strength that even fear could not strip away. She asked him then, "What do we do with this?" He held her eyes for a long moment, then looked back at the folder, his jaw clenched. He whispered, "We find out who hid it, and we end this before it ends us both." A noise outside the door made her flinch. Voices in the corridor, footsteps drawing near. She looked at him, her eyes wide, but he raised a hand, motioning for her to stay silent. The voices passed, but the sound left a shadow in the room, like ghosts, warning them that their time was thin. He pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly, then shoving it back into his pocket, his face tight. Someone on the board has been rerouting funds, masking it as overseas projects. They thought no one would ever look closely enough. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the edge of the papers again, and she said softly, "But you saw it, and I saw it, which means they will know soon that you are not blind anymore." His silence was an answer heavy with danger. She realized he was already deciding who to trust and who to sacrifice. Her heart ached as she thought of her children asleep in their small apartment across the city. They knew nothing of this world of polished glass towers and silent wars fought with numbers and lies, but she knew if she walked away now, it might all crash into her home anyway. The CEO finally spoke again, his voice lower, colder. "We need to test you. If you are truly with me, then you will help me find proof. If you are not, then you will disappear before they make you disappear." The words stabbed, but she lifted her chin, her voice steady. "Then tell me what I need to do." His eyes softened with something like respect, though shadowed with suspicion. He walked toward a hidden panel in the wall, pressed his hand, and a drawer slid open, revealing files thicker than anything she had ever seen. He placed one on the table. "Open it," he ordered. She did. Inside were contracts, signatures, transactions, numbers coded like riddles that only someone desperate enough to study would notice. He told her, "These are the paths of the stolen money. Find the pattern, because whoever wrote this left fingerprints." Her hands trembled as she flipped the pages, but her mind sharpened, the way it did when she balanced grocery bills, when she knew every cent mattered. Her eyes caught repeated initials, fake companies linked to real ones. She circled them with the pen. He tossed her. The CEO leaned over her shoulder, watching his breathing heavier with every mark she made, until his face turned white. "These names," he muttered, "they are not just strangers, they are people. I have dined with people who sit in this building and smile in my face." The door rattled suddenly, a knock loud and sharp. Both of them froze. She felt her heart leap into her throat. The CEO closed the folder, swiftly sliding it back into the drawer, before calling out, "Who is it?" A voice answered, muffled but tense, "Sir, the board members downstairs. They said the meeting cannot be delayed any longer." He glanced at her, then at the papers, his mind racing. "Tell them I will be there in 10, he replied, his tone smooth as stone. When the footsteps faded, he turned to her, his expression grave. "You cannot leave this room until I come back. If they see you with me tonight, it will be the end." She nodded, fear pressing down on her chest. He left, the room closing the door gently behind him, and she was alone with the silence, her fingers gripped the table edge, her reflection staring back at her in the polished surface. She whispered to herself, "What have I done?" Minutes felt like hours, the city lights flickering outside as if mocking her. She thought of her children again, wondered if she would make it back to them, wondered if they would even know why their mother never returned. Then she heard it, the faintest click, the handle of the door turning. Slowly her breath caught. She pressed back into the shadows, her body shaking. The door opened a sliver, a man's silhouette slipping inside, not the CEO, someone else. He moved quietly, scanning the room, his gaze landing on the mop and bucket, then sweeping to the table she held. Her breath crouched low behind the chairs, his hand reached into his jacket, pulling out something metallic, a flash of light from the city window revealed it was not a phone, not a pen, but a small gun. Her stomach twisted. He stepped toward the table, his eyes searching the shadows. She clutched her chest, praying he would not hear her heart pounding. The folder was gone, hidden by the CEO. But the man still searched as if he knew something was missing. He cursed under his breath, low and harsh, and she recognized the voice, one of the senior executives, someone she had seen laughing with the CEO during parties when she polished the floors unseen. He turned sharply toward the shadows, his steps approaching, and she knew if she stayed silent, she might die. If she moved, she might die. Her hand brushed the mop handle. She gripped it tight, forcing herself to breathe steady as he came closer. His gun raised, she waited until his shadow stretched long across her hiding place. Then, with every ounce of fear and fury, she swung the mop, the metal handle clashing against his wrist, the gun clattering across the marble floor. He snarled, grabbing her arm. She kicked hard, scrambling for the weapon. It slid across the floor, out of reach, both of them diving for it. The world spun in noise and panic until a new voice cut through the chaos, sharp, commanding. "Stop!" The CEO stood in the doorway, his eyes blazing. He strode forward, kicked the gun away, and seized the executive by the collar. The man stammered, "Sir, it is not what it looks like." But the CEO's face was ice. "It is exactly what it looks like," he growled, then shoved him against the wall. The janitor mom lay on the floor, panting, her chest heaving. The CEO looked down at her for a moment, his eyes holding something unspoken before turning back to the traitor, his voice low. "You should not have come here tonight," the executive sneered. "You have no proof." But his eyes darted toward her, and he realized too late that she was the proof, her memory, her courage, her refusal to look away. The CEO dragged the man out, calling security with a tone that allowed no questions. When the door closed again, she curled against the wall, shaking but alive, the papers still hidden, the truth still burning in her mind. She realized then that the secret was bigger than one man, bigger than one company, and that she was no longer just a janitor. She was now part of a game where survival meant outsmarting predators who wore suits and smiled while they buried the world in lies. And she knew part of her could never go back to silence again. The janitor mom sat on the cold floor of the boardroom, her hands still shaking from the struggle. The shadows of the city lights moving across the glass like restless spirits. Her mind spun with questions. Who was that man? Why was he armed? Why had the CEO pulled her into this storm, instead of letting her slip back into the safety of her invisible life? She wanted to believe that she could still walk away, but her heart told her the moment she saw those numbers, her life had crossed a line that could not be erased. The door creaked open again. The CEO stepped inside, his expression unreadable. His tie loosened, his eyes carrying the weight of a man who had just silenced a traitor. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it for a long breath. Then he looked at her. "You should have left when you had the chance." His words carried no anger, only truth. But she shook her head. "Because if I had left, you would be standing here with a bullet instead of me." He almost smiled, almost, but then his face hardened again. "You do not understand the scale of what you found. This is not just about missing money. This is about people who believe they own this city, and they will kill to protect that belief." She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "Why me? Why did I have to be the one to find it?" He stared at her, then whispered, "Maybe because you were the only one too invisible to ignore." Before she could answer, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, his face tightening. He muttered, "The board is restless. They know something is off." He turned back to her. "You cannot stay here tonight. Go home, but keep your mouth shut. Not to anyone, not even your children." Her stomach clenched at the thought of her kids already caught in the shadows of a game they did not even know existed. But she nodded because she had no choice. When she left the building, the night air slapped against her skin. Cold sharp, the streets empty except for the hum of traffic. She pulled her jacket tight around her, as if it could shield her from the storm curling around her life. She boarded the late bus, the fluorescent lights buzzing above her, and every stranger's gaze feeling like a threat. She clutched her bag tighter inside it. The pen the CEO had given her, still marked with circles on the copied sheets she had secretly kept her insurance by. The time she reached her small apartment, her chest ached with exhaustion. She pushed the key into the lock but froze. The door was already ajar. Her breath caught. She stepped inside carefully, her heart hammering. The living room was still, the lamp flickering, her children asleep on the couch, untouched, their faces soft in dreams. She let out a shaky breath, but then she saw it. On the kitchen table, a single mop handle standing upright, tied with a red ribbon, and no note at all. Her knees nearly gave out. She rushed to her children, checked their breathing, kissed their hair, and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Then her phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out, and her blood ran cold. A message from an unknown number, a single sentence: "Do not trust him." Her hands trembled. She typed back, "Who are you?" But there was no reply, only another message with a photo of the CEO sitting at the boardroom table, his face shadowed, his hands clasped like a man waiting for judgment. She stared at the image until her vision blurred with fear and anger. She whispered to herself, "What game is this? Who is the hunter, and who is the prey?" The next morning she tried to act normal, cooking eggs, packing lunches, kissing her children goodbye, but every movement felt watched, every corner heavy with eyes. She went back to work, the building taller than ever, a tower of secrets. She entered with her badge, but when she reached her cart, something new was waiting. Taped to the mop bucket, a small envelope. Inside was a temporary staff ID with her photo, and a note scrawled in hurried ink: "Trust no one, not even me." Her stomach twisted. She glanced around, but no one was watching. The halls empty, the cameras blinking silently. She slipped the ID into her pocket, her mind racing. Had the CEO sent this, or someone else? She could not tell, and the not knowing was worse than anything. Later that night, she was summoned to the executive floor. Again, the CEO's assistant greeted her with a strange smile, whispering, "He wants to see you." Her footsteps echoed as she entered the office. The CEO, sitting behind his desk, papers spread before him, his eyes lifting to hers, cold but steady. He pushed a folder across the desk. Inside were more documents, more trails of stolen funds, but this time the initials were clearer, and among them was one name. She recognized. Her throat closed. The name belonged to a man from her past, a man she thought she would never see connected to this world. She looked up at the CEO, but his face revealed nothing, as if he already knew what she had seen. He said softly, "You understand now. This touches you too." She shook her head in disbelief, but the truth stared back from the ink and numbers, betrayal reaching farther than she had imagined before. She could speak. The office phone rang. The CEO answered, listened, and his face drained. He hung up slowly, his voice a low growl. "They know someone is looking, and they are moving fast." He rose from his chair, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. He turned to her and said, "If you want to survive this, you have to choose, right? Now, are you with me or against me?" The question cut her deeper than a knife, because she realized then that the most dangerous man in the building might not be the traitor she had seen with a gun. It might be the man standing right in front of her. And as the city lights flickered outside like 1,000 watching eyes, she knew her answer would decide not only her fate, but her children's. The boardroom lights burned against her eyes, but it was the question that scorched deeper than fire. "Are you with me or against me?" The janitor mom stood rooted to the carpet, her hands trembling against her uniform. The man in front of her looked less like a leader and more like a cornered animal. His sharp suit could not hide the crack in his calm. His words carried a threat hidden inside the offer. She wanted to scream. She wanted to demand answers, but all that came out was a whisper. "Why should I trust you?" CEO leaned closer, his voice low enough to slice through her chest. "Because the people you think are safe, the people who tell you to trust them, will be the first to sell you out, and when they do, it will not be me standing over your children in the night. It will be them." He paused, his eyes hard. "And you know I am right because someone already left a message at your home." She froze, her breath caught. He knew she had not told him about the mop handle and the ribbon. She felt her skin crawl. How much did he know? How deep were his eyes in her life? Her mouth opened, but no words came. The CEO pushed the folder closer. "Look at the names." Again, do you see the one that matters to you? She glanced down at the page, and the name burned like fire across her memory. A man she had known long ago, a man who had walked out of her life, leaving only scars and unpaid debts, now tied to millions and millions stolen from this empire. She looked up at the CEO, her throat raw. How do you know about him? He did not answer. Instead, he said, because I know everything about everyone who can destroy me, including you. A knock shattered the heavy silence. The door creaked open, and two board members stepped in, their smiles to wide their eyes, to sharp the CEO's straightened, masking his fear with polished charm. Gentlemen, you are early, one of them replied with a chuckle. Not early, just curious. The rumors are restless these days, the other added, his gaze sliding to the janitor, Mom, who stood half hidden by the desk. Who is she? The question was smooth, but the danger in it was sharp. The CEO replied without hesitation, my assistant on a temporary contractor. Janitor Mom felt her heart thud, but she kept her face down. The board members chuckled again, exchanging glances. One said, well, assistants come and go, but numbers never lie. Remember that. Their laughter faded as they left the office, leaving behind a silence heavy with unspoken threats. The CEO exhaled sharply, then turned back to her. Now, you see why there is no choice left. She pressed her hands flat against the desk, steadying herself, her voice low. Then I will stand with you, but if you betray me, I will bury you. His lips curved into a thin line, perhaps the first true smile she had seen from him. Good, he said, because the storm is about to break. That night, she walked home through streets that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Every shadow heavy, every passing car suspicious. When she reached her building, the lights in the hallway flickered. She stepped inside her apartment, her children asleep, but her eyes caught something new on the kitchen counter. A phone. Not hers, not anyone's. She picked it up, and the screen lit without touch. A message already waiting it. Read, he will sacrifice you when it is convenient. Her chest tightened, her grip trembling. She set the phone down, but her reflection in the dark window whispered the same warning over and over. She curled up beside her children that night, unable to close her eyes, listening for footsteps that never came. The next day she was summoned again, this time to the sublevel archives, a place she had never entered. Concrete walls, humming lights, cold air. The CEO waited with stacks of files spread on a metal table. These are the roots, he said. They buried the money years ago, slowly, quietly, through shell companies and ghost contracts. If we follow it far enough, we will find the one pulling the strings. She sat across from him, flipping through the pages until she froze. Another familiar name leaped from the ink. Her pulse spiked. She looked at him, but before she could speak, the lights above flickered, the hum of electricity shuddered, and then silence swallowed the room. Pitch black. She gasped in the dark. Footsteps echoed. The CEO hissed, stay down. A door slammed open, light from flashlights cutting the shadows. Armed men stormed in, their faces hidden, their weapons glinting. The janitor Mom ducked under the table, clutching the folder to her chest. The CEO pulled her by the arm, dragging her toward the back door, but the men moved faster, blocking their escape. One of them shouted, hand over the files, and maybe we'll let you walk out. She knew it was a lie. Their voices carried death inside them. The CEO's grip tightened. He whispered, run when say. She shook her head, terrified, but before she could protest, he shoved a heavy keycard into her hand. Run, he growled, and then threw a chair against the attackers. The crash echoed like thunder. She sprinted through the side door, heart hammering, racing down the corridor, her breath ragged behind her. The clash of voices, the thud of fists, the echo of struggle. She burst into the night, air stumbling into the alley, clutching the folder tighter than life itself. She kept running until her lungs burned, until her legs gave way, collapsing against a brick wall. When she finally dared to look back, the alley was empty, the night silent. She clutched the keycard in her hand, realizing it was marked with an unfamiliar code. Numbers she did not understand, but somehow she knew it mattered. She whispered to herself, what did you give me? What am I supposed to do? Her phone buzzed again, the unknown number, a new message, this time with just 3 words, bring it tonight. She stared at the glowing screen, her body trembling with the choice tearing her apart. Trust the CEO who had already admitted he could sacrifice her, or trust the ghost who warned her but never revealed their face. She closed her eyes, hearing her children's laughter in her mind, and she knew one thing: the next step would decide whether she would protect them or lose them forever. And as the city breathed around her, heavy with secrets, she rose again, clutching the folder, the keycard, and the weight of a decision that could shatter everything. The trap was closing, and she was caught in the center of it. The night wrapped itself around her like a net. She could not break free from the city lights, blinking cold above the alley, the folder clutched against her chest, the keycard pressed into her palm like a secret that could decide life or death. She wanted to run home to her children and never look back, but she knew the choice was gone the moment she saw those numbers. The missing billions had tied her fate to powers she never wanted to know. Her phone buzzed again, the same number this time. The message said, "Come alone." She stared at the glowing screen, her pulse thundering in her ears. She thought of the CEO, his words, his warning, his eyes when he said survival required loyalty, but she also thought of the phone left in her kitchen. The message that warned, "He will sacrifice you when it is convenient." Every step forward felt like stepping deeper into a pit, but she had no other path. She walked through the dark streets, her reflection following in the shop windows, her shadow stretched long by the street lamps. She reached the address the message had sent and abandoned. The warehouse on the edge of the river. The rusted doors groaned as she pushed them open, the smell of iron and water heavy inside. A single lamp hung from the rafters, casting a pale light over a figure waiting in the center. It was not the CEO, it was another man, older, sharp eyes, suit slightly worn, but presence heavy like stone. He stepped forward slowly, his voice calm but carrying power. "I knew your mother." Once his words froze her in place. Her lips parted but no sound came. "My mother," she whispered. He nodded. "I knew her when she worked in the same buildings, cleaning the same floors." She was smarter than anyone gave her credit for, but she was silenced when she found something she should not have. He paused, his gaze piercing. "And now her daughter has found something even bigger." Her chest ached. Her mother had died when she was young, the truth wrapped in silence, but now the shadows whispered it had never been natural. She gripped the folder tighter, tears burning her eyes. "Who are you?" she demanded. He smiled faintly. "I am the one who has been keeping you alive. These past nights, every warning, every message came from me. I could not let them take you like they took Herthurum." Spun her breath shallow. The man continued, "The CEO will not protect you. He cannot. He has already made promises to those who stole the money, promises that require your silence forever." His voice grew sharper. "The keycard in your hand holds the final link to the account that can expose them all, but only if you give it to me." Her heart thudded. She stared at the keycard, then back at him. Her mother's ghost seemed to whisper from the corners of the warehouse, "Trust no one but the truth." She forced her voice steady. "If you have been protecting me, why do you need me to give this to you?" He stepped closer. "Because only you can open it. The system was designed to require someone without power, someone invisible. That is why they used your mother years ago, and why you were meant to stay blind until tonight." She shook her head, anger rising. "You say you want the truth, but how do I know you are not just another piece of this game?" He sighed, his eyes heavy with weariness. "Because if I wanted you dead, you would already be gone, and because you deserve to know who killed your mother." The words sliced through her chest. She staggered, her grip trembling. He lowered his voice. "It was not an accident, not sickness. She found a secret like you did, and the same men tried to bury it before she could speak." The sound of engines roared outside, black cars pulling up, doors slamming. The man's face hardened. "Too late." He whispered. "They followed you." He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back exit, but gunfire shattered the silence. Glass raining from the windows, shadows flooding the warehouse, armed men in dark suits, their voices barking orders. She clutched the folder to her chest, running with him through the narrow corridor. Bullets ricocheting against the walls, they burst into the night air, sprinting along the river. The man dragging her forward, but suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows, blocking their path. It was the CEO, his eyes burning, his voice cold. "Give me Picard." Now his presence was heavier than the men with guns. Behind him he lifted his hand, not with a weapon but with power, his guards appearing around him like wolves. The man beside her whispered, "Do not trust him. Your mother died because of him." Her body froze, her mind screamed. The CEO stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers, his voice steady. "You know me. You know I am the only one who can keep your children alive. Hand it to me, and this ends here." Her heart tore between two fires, one promising revenge, the other promising survival, both dripping with betrayal. The night air pressed against her lungs, every second stretching like a blade. Her children's faces flashing in her mind. She looked at the keycard, its numbers glowing faintly under the streetlight. The truth, heavier than any weight she had ever carried on. In that moment, she realized no matter which man she gave it to, she would lose something she could never get back. The only question was whether she would lose her soul. Along with it, the air around her felt like fire and ice. At the same time, the Janitor Mum stood between two men, both with eyes full of secrets, both demanding the keycard that burned against her palm behind her. The sound of approaching boots from the armed men echoed like thunder in her ears. The man who claimed to know her mother whispered that the CEO was the very reason her mother died, while the CEO's voice came sharp and steady, promising survival for her and her children. If she chose him, each word clawed at her chest. She wanted to collapse, she wanted to scream, but she knew one thing: if she broke now, her children would grow up without her. She lifted her chin, her voice shaking but fierce. "No one will own me, not you, not him, not anyone." The CEO's gaze hardened, his jaw clenched. The older man's eyes flickered with something like sorrow, but also fear. She realized in that instant they were both liars in different clothes, both men willing to bury her once they had what they wanted. The footsteps grew louder, the circle closing around her. She pressed the folder to her chest, clutching the keycard in her fist, and whispered almost to herself, "Then I choose me." With a sudden burst of movement, she turned and ran toward the river, the night air slicing against her face, bullets cracking behind her, shouts filling the darkness. The water glimmered like a wall of silver. She sprinted harder than she ever had in her life, her heart screaming with every beat. She leaped into the icy water, the folder held high above her head as she plunged, the cold ripping through her body. But she kicked with every ounce of strength, pushing herself downstream out of sight of the dock. She heard the chaos behind her, the shouts, the splashes, but she did not stop. She held the folder tight until the current carried her into shadows under the bridge, where silence finally returned. Hours later she staggered into her apartment, drenched, trembling but alive. Her children stirred as she slipped inside. Quietly she dropped to her knees beside them, tears spilling down her face. She kissed their hair, whispered, "I will not let them take me. I will not let them take us." She pulled the folder from her soaked jacket, and the keycard still clutched in her fist. She knew keeping it was death, but giving it away was worse. She worked through the night, scanning the papers, reading every number until her eyes blurred, piecing together the codes, the trails, the names. The keycards, numbers, matched with the hidden accounts. Her mother's handwriting appeared in old copied notes buried inside the files. Her chest shook with grief. She realized her mother had died trying to finish this same fight. By dawn, she had everything, the proof that could not be denied. She dressed her children, sent them to a trusted neighbor, and walked alone to the press building downtown, her uniform still damp, her eyes hollow but burning. She handed the folder and the keycard to the editor, her voice steady. "Tell them everything. Tell the world who has been stealing from them." The story broke like fire across the city. Headlines screamed billions, stolen, betrayal at the highest level. Board members arrested, politicians questioned the CEO, dragged into scandal, cameras flashing his name, cursed instead of praised. The older man who claimed to protect her vanished into silence, his promises drowned by truth. The janitor Mum stood outside the building, her heart heavy but steady, watching the chaos unfold. Knowing the world was no longer blind that night, she returned home, her children running into her arms, their laughter a shield against all the shadows. She whispered to them, "We are safe now." And for the first time in years, she believed it. She had no riches, no power, only the strength of surviving the storm, and the knowledge that her mother's fight had not died in vain. She stood at the window, staring at the city lights, no longer feeling small, no longer feeling invisible. She had faced men who thought they owned the world, and she had walked away, not as a janitor, not as a victim, but as the woman who uncovered the truth, the woman who refused to bow, the woman who chose her children and herself over their power. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you really are. And as she whispered goodnight to her children, she finally understood that she had not just solved an $800 million problem, she had solved the mystery of her own strength. The end.